Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome into another YouTube live show. John Kurtz with you here tonight. I promise, sometime soon, we will get to stop talking about lawsuits and settlements and all of the fallout from that. But today, unfortunately, not one of those days. We still have the latest to get to on that, which includes a lawsuit that, of course, is fired up in response to the House settlement. And some reaction from Big 12 athletic directors, and a thought that I have been hearing that, hey, this may actually be a pretty naive reaction from folks in the Big 12. So we'll discuss that, a little bit more of the fallout. This is kind of the opposite side. Think of today as the opposite side of the Texas Tech and BYU part of the discussion, where with Texas Tech and BYU, it was very much more like, okay, are they going to be hurt by the House settlement? Today is more, what could this actually do to the entirety of the Big 12, and or does it even matter? Does it even matter? Okay. Bracket Cat, you must be young, man, if you don't know Brian Wilson. I knew Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. And there it is, a bit before my time. I mean, me too, but I am aware of Brian Wilson. Dad used to listen to the Beach Boys back in the day. Anyway, so yeah, shout out to Brian Wilson. Rest in peace. Yeah, there's a lot of fallout still to come from the House settlement. And then I do promise I have some football for you here. I may even have one extra, like, actual football topic, which I found very interesting, from ESPN projecting the next 2 years. They did basically a top all Power 4 teams ranking of what they expect the next 2 years to look like in college football. 4 Big 12 teams made the top 25. One Big 12 team made the top 15. And some of these teams down at the very bottom, the Big 12 took up a bunch of spaces at the very bottom. We'll see. We'll either get to that here or we will get to that on the next live show. But squeezing in that, BYU fans, pay attention. Utah fans, pay attention. I know it's been a little bit tough with the headlines lately coming out of Provo as it regards the football program. But you'll want to stay tuned for this. We've got a W. We've got a definitive, emphatic W for the Cougars over their arch rival to talk about today. Appreciate everybody for being here. As you file in, please do like the video. Appreciate you doing that. Totally free. If you want to make sure your question or comment gets on tonight, first of all, go ahead and comment. Talk about whatever it is that you want. Beach Boys, anything like that, I suppose. Welcome in the chat. But if you want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box. That will create a super chat, which means you are for sure getting in tonight. Also, just supports the work I'm doing here on this channel. Really appreciate everybody who does that. So thank you. Let's see, boy. Sure don't like those popping up on me. You can submit a question or comment on Venmo as well. If you're not watching this live, it is John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo in order to do that. So if you are not catching it live, you can still be a part of the conversation. I'll kick off the next show with your question or comment if you do that. And make sure you are subscribed to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. That is ofbnews.com to get subscribed to that. Got one of those that'll be coming either tomorrow night or Friday morning. So stay tuned for that. And you'll get it to your inbox multiple times a week for free. We've got 4,300 plus Big 12 fans subscribing to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. So join the crowd. ofbnews.com, or you can click the link in the description of this video. Okay, well, Stan, I feel like you're just trying to lead me right in here. Stan, how long until female athletes sue over the pay to men via the House settlement? Well, it has already happened. Stan, it has already happened. This is where we're at. It did not take very long for a lawsuit to come about, and this is why college sports leaders are just furiously courting Congress and the president right now. All things that if you would have told me 10 years ago I was going to be covering while still following and covering college athletics on a daily basis, I would never have guessed, but that's where we're at. They have made some legitimate progress, apparently, in Congress. But this battle is really heating up because you've got some optimism, at least coming out through some reporting, on what's going on in Congress while you're trying to combat lawsuits from coming at you, which have already started predictably, and it's about Title IX. So I'm going to go in chronological order here. Like the Title IX lawsuit happened today. The Athletic has some reporting. Many people had reporting. I'm going to read to you from The Athletic, but lots of reporting about what is actually happening in Congress with their push to basically what they want to do is just set in stone everything in the House settlement and keep it away from being able to be legally challenged, get some protections from Congress in that regard. So The Athletic says everything that is in this bill that is being kicked around now, which is called the SCORE Act, okay? Always clever, those politicians, the SCORE Act. It's in all caps, so I don't know if that's if they stand for something. I'm not sure what exactly that is. But it's the SCORE Act, and it has really everything you would think that these college leaders would want. It would fully deputize the Collegiate Sports Commission to enforce the settlement rules. So they would be able to enforce name, image, and likeness more than $600, having to go through the fair market value protocols. That would not be able to be challenged. It would allow a revenue sharing cap to be unchallenged, the $20 million for 25-26. It would preempt state NIL laws with a national NIL law, which means you can't have different states trying to give certain advantages to the schools in their state based on whatever it is that they're going to sign into law, which we're seeing happen all over the place right now. It would allow the NCAA conferences or another entity to establish and enforce rules around transfers, eligibility length, all that stuff. So it would potentially rein in, I suppose, a little bit of the transfer portal craziness. It would declare that college athletes are not employees, okay? Not employees, key distinction there. And it would require athlete agents to register with an entity such as the CSC or NCAA. That's probably a very good thing no matter what. Like, that you got a lot of bad actors, it seems like, running around in this space, like masquerading as agents for a lot of the college athletes. So, I don't know. I mean, first of all, I guess you could say optimism for the bill is like, well, that's like everything they want. But I think that's been kind of expected. I know like Ross Dellinger just kind of had a tweet that was like, yeah, well, this is what we expected. Everybody thought that this would be in there. But as far as how likely it is, here's what The Athletic says. A House subcommittee is scheduled to discuss the draft at a Thursday hearing. So tomorrow, a House subcommittee will discuss it. To support it, the House's Judiciary Committee is expected to discuss a bill for antitrust protections around these items, while the House's Education and Workforce Committee will work to codify that athletes are not employees. So I guess they're just working on different pieces of it there. I know that a lot of the skepticism about this is like, all right, how do you get Republicans and Democrats on the same page here when they can't get on the same page about literally anything? There are some things in there that would be concessions on the other side to those on the left in this. It says the main energy and commerce bill, if passed, would also codify several athlete protections that Democrats have asked for, requiring schools to provide injury care for athletes for at least 2 years after graduation. I mean, I like that. Catastrophic injury insurance and additional mental health services, and give autonomous authority to team physicians and trainers over player health and return to play decisions. So like a coach would not be able to overrule a doctor. It would also make law that schools cannot pull scholarships or aid over performance or injury. It did also note like a lot of that stuff is kind of already there, but it would lock that more into stone. So that's the hope, is that you give enough in the way of concessions on that side, and then on the other side, you come around and you help everybody in the NCAA and college sports that's trying to push for everything else. Now we've got the lawsuits, though, as was alluded to by Stan. What we got today, Stan, was 8 female athletes filed an appeal of the House v. NCAA settlement in a California federal court, arguing that the landmark agreement violates Title IX. You knew that was coming. Like, lawyers were just sitting there waiting, circling like just sharks in the water, waiting for the chum to come out there. They got it, and now they're here suing. Now, the interesting part of this, though, is that this lawsuit only addresses the back pay part of this, which never really gets talked about. Like, nobody is talking about the back pay part of this, which is that $2.8 million are being paid to all the student athletes that did not have the opportunity to earn NIL because they played before that came into the picture. So all the schools are like on the hook for a bunch of money as far as that goes, which is another stressor on the schools financially here. But that part has been paused for now because of this lawsuit. It's not about moving forward. But what I don't understand is like why it wouldn't be, because now this is where I'm not a legal guy, but you might as well just go ahead and do the one moving forward too, because this basically just lays the groundwork for the exact same thing. Because the appeal, so it's an appeal to this settlement, argues that the $2.8 billion in damages set to be distributed to former athletes who couldn't earn NIL violates Title IX because female athletes will be paid less than football and men's basketball players. That's going to be the exact same argument moving forward, right? Like, all right, if you're saying that, hey, like 90% of this money, so which is what this settlement suggests, it says schools would have paid male athletes over 90% of their revenue over the past 6 years, as though Title IX didn't apply. I mean, yeah, like that's football, men's basketball are going to be getting like 90% of the money moving forward out of revenue sharing. So you've got the exact same challenge sitting there. So I assume that that piece of it will come at some point. For now, it's just about the back pay, but it's there, it's happening, it's going to happen. You're right, Bracket Cat. Everybody does want their cut right now, but the biggest cut is happening in favor of billable hours. And of course, all the attorneys here who are going to be able to file these lawsuits. So really, the reason I lead with this, I know it's kind of boring. It feels like we're beating a dead horse at this point. Everybody has said all this is coming. It's rolling out exactly like everybody predicted that it would right now. But I guess that's kind of the point in bringing it up, is like, hey, what everybody thought was going to happen is happening. And this is just going to be like a deluge of lawsuits, appeals, and lobbying in Congress, waiting, hoping, wishing that they get something done to see where all this is going to start to land. Meanwhile, we are it's June 11th. We're like less than 3 months away from the start of another college football season. So we're barreling toward the start of another season where, guys are going to be getting paid. And then before you know it, I mean, we're less than 6 months away from firing up the portal season for next year. And then that, to me, is when it'll really get interesting, because that's when you're going to start having to dole out new contracts. A lot of these contracts for this year in football, at least, football and men's basketball, have been divvied up before they were under the purview of Deloitte and the House settlement and all that. So it's a little bit different this year. Next year, in about 6 months is when this really starts to get interesting. Like, how much are they going to, at that point, have the ability to do in terms of Deloitte and the College Sports Commission to monitor everything for fair market value? That's when it could get even messier. Like, if I were to predict right now, I think it's going to be a little treacherous and a little bit messy for now. But once you hit December and the transfer portal opens up after the football season, that's when it's going to start getting really, really wonky, trying to figure out how all of that will break down. So, I mean, stay tuned is about the only thing I can really say on that front. But for right now, everything kind of playing out the way that most thought it would here. Okay, so now let's take that bigger picture. And by the way, subscribe to the channel, please. Like the video. All of that really helps. Is great. Totally free. Also totally free to subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. To do that, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you want to contribute that way, if you're not watching live, you can leave me a question or comment there. So let's bring it back to the Big 12. Okay. Big 12 athletic directors, namely Travis Goff at Kansas, who I mentioned very briefly, I think, on the last show. But he was optimistic to the point of being very combative about being able to control the NIL environment through the House settlement. Really optimistic about its ability to truly keep it from getting out of control, level the playing field, and keep football rosters from costing $40 million every year to be competitive. That's the basic idea there if you want to have optimism about it. But is that a very naive point of view? Because there are many, including some people that I spoke to, that would suggest that it is just way, way too naive of a viewpoint. So let's dive into this, like our Big 12 athletic directors, because Travis Goff is not the only one. He may have been the only one that was popping off with his Twitter fingers the other day about this, but he is far from the only one to feel this way, or at least to hope that he feels this way. Like, that's where it'd be interesting, I think, to know truth serum wise, deep down, do these athletic directors really, really feel like the enforcement entity will have teeth and be able to control this? Or is it just wishful thinking, hope casting, wish casting? A lot of different phrases that you could use these days to try and describe what that is. I think it's fair to wonder that a bit. And I say this as somebody who, by the way, the reason that I brought up Travis Goff, I think on the last show, was to say, like, hey, I appreciate what he is saying here, and I appreciate his point of view. Like, if he's not going to be optimistic about it, who actually is? The athletic directors need to be leading the charge on that if they're going to pull some people along there. Like, they've got to be much more evangelical about this than most people. So I get it. This is not like I'm dragging Travis Goff through the mud or Big 12 athletic directors in general through the mud kind of a segment. It's just me looking at this and saying, okay, like, what are the odds here? Is this too naive? Do there need to be, because it is one thing to try and lead the charge here on being optimistic about this and try and get others there with you and supply some real hope that this can keep it from being such a crazy arms race that no one in the Big 12 will be able to keep up long term. But there's a fine line between doing that and then bracing yourself for reality and preparing. Not just bracing yourself, but preparing for whatever the reality of this is going to be and making sure that you'll be able to react to that if and when that reality ever comes to fruition and it happens. So anyway, whether or not you feel like the House settlement is going to take away the opportunity to go like all Texas Tech on your roster, which means spend $40 million, pull in a top-ranked portal class, which can be a good thing for the Big 12. And we're going to talk about that later. Dan Wetzel wrote a really good article about that. You can look at that and say that levels the playing field, because Texas Tech would not be able to pull in a number one portal class if we had the portal 10 years ago, because they couldn't just overspend for it, right? They couldn't just get crazy with the money for it. So you can argue that that's a bad thing for the Big 12. But I think most of the Big 12, at least these athletic directors, are very much in the mindset of like, man, but yes, if that opportunity is out there, maybe in the short term that affords us some opportunities. But long term, we just will not be able to keep up with that. Like, we can't do that over the long haul. I absolutely cannot do that. And that's I think where a lot of that perspective comes from. So let's try this. Here was the first one. I don't know which order of these is actually better, of the Travis Goff tweets here. This first one. So On3, an article from On3. Power 4 schools will have $13 to $16 million to spend on football, but top budgets will touch 25 to 30. Will the price of an elite quarterback change? Hell no, the price for a quarterback isn't changing. So yeah, this article is kind of about, again, like everybody, some pessimism on what everybody thinks will happen in light of the House settlement. Like, hey man, it's not going to change these rosters. These big time boosters are already spending all this money. Good luck getting them to actually back off of this once that cat has already been let out of the bag. So Travis Goff says, an anonymous source tells me these anonymous quotes are hot garbage. I mean, that's pretty strong, right? I said combatively optimistic. Travis Goff is like combatively optimistic about this. If we took them too seriously, you would think our industry wants this new chapter to fail. Now, that I can get behind with Travis Goff, regardless of what you think about how naive his point of view may or may not be. There are a lot of quotes that are pretty ferociously projecting what they think will happen here. I can understand how you would get the feeling that there are people out there who like really want this to fail. And I mean, there are some. I think there are some media members who are like, so pro player, which I am very much pro player getting paid, but I think there are some that are like so pro player getting paid that it does come across like they are really rooting for this to fail and for the players just to complete free market, keep earning and earning and earning. I think that does create a lot of problems. I think we do need some semblance of, people hate the term guardrails. I think it would make it better for most involved if that happened. But if I'm Travis Goff, I would be looking at this too and feeling like, God, it feels like people really want this to fail. Now, he says the quiet majority is bullish on where we're heading. Is it the quiet majority? Is that a fair statement? I don't know. I don't know if that is a fair statement or not, to say that it's the quiet majority. But he is the one athletic director I mentioned that really got out there and got after it on Twitter. So maybe that's just a reference to like, hey, all these other ADs feel the same way I do. They're just not going to come out and make these sort of statements. This was the longer one from Travis Goff. Said, I've never read more dramatic anonymous source quotes than those used in these types of articles. The sky's falling. Schools are going to spend $1 billion on rosters. We don't stand a chance. Cut the crap. We griped about the old world, and some are throwing their hands up before we even get started in this next chapter. Settlement is strong. Plan is solid. Hope we can do our part to give it a chance. I guess, again, I find myself like defending Travis Goff a little bit here. I would just say, even if you think it's unrealistic that this will work out, you got to try. I mean, like, the settlement happened. You got to try. Try to get Congress to give you some protections. You're halfway down this road, right? Like, you started, you're all the way up there, man. You got on the ski lift. You're all the way up the mountain. There's only one way down. You got to go. So give it an effort. Yes, you do. But there are plenty. And I'm telling you, like, I talked to a couple of people involved in this, and I'm not telling you I'm like crazy inside source guy or whatever, but a lot of what I heard was definitely very similar to what a lot of these anonymous quotes are. Like, man, these Big 12 athletic directors are a little bit too naive. Like, they're just too naive in thinking that this is going to work. There's really not a chance. Like, people in college athletics have been cheating for decades. They're going to find a way to cheat and get around this no matter what it is that happens. Whether it's a lawsuit that codifies this, well, then it'll just go back to under the table, hand you some money cheating. Or even if it does codify, it'll be one thing that I heard that was, I was like, oh man, that's actually kind of a brilliant workaround that people I'm sure have thought about, is if, say, they're denying your NIL deal for being fair market value because the student athlete is not doing enough appearances for you or whatever, we just load up the contract with like, oh, they're going to do 5 appearances a week for me in the off season or whatever. Well, knowing in the back of your mind, you have no intention of holding them to that. So you can get the deal approved for more money because they're doing more things, and then not hold them to that, with the idea being, how in the world would Deloitte or the College Sports Commission be able to track every NIL deal? Like, how do you quality control that? I guess you could just pick some randomly one-offs, but I don't know. That it'd be a tough thing to monitor all of that. So there are just a lot of ways to work around. And if that's already out there in the ethos that's being talked about, you know that there are people thinking about that as a way to do this and get around it all. So people will do it. They will figure it out. And so I will just tell you, the internal feeling that I was getting from the college sports world was very much in line with more of the anonymous quotes and less what was going on with Travis Goff here. But look, man, if you're Travis Goff, you got a stadium to fund. You've been tapping into donors for that. Kansas is doing a very good job with football recruiting right now because they are pouring money into it. They realize they have a good coach and that football is really the currency of the future, and you got to make sure that football program keeps going. They're putting money into that, and now it's, by the way, you've got a blue blood basketball program led by Bill Self that you've got to keep enough money in the bank for, as well as they're in the portal. So it's just, these costs are adding up, man. And I get how you'd be looking around like, I know, how do we sustain this? How is it possible in any world to sustain this? Plus, if you're thinking about donors and like donor fatigue and everything that you're asking them to do right now, if the table stakes of having a competitive football roster in the Big 12 are going to be like $25 or $30 million a year, which I think is pretty close, 2025 this year, I think is what it would really take to have a pretty competitive football roster in the Big 12. If that's just table stakes, like that's what you have just to get into the party. I mean, how many programs are going to be a 7-5 program over the next 5 years, spending all that money? Like, talk about donor fatigue. They're going to be like, man, this is kind of boring. Like, we go 7-5 every year. You know how that happens with tons of programs out there. Like that, you want to run off the coach, fire the coach. Well, now, okay, well, we need the money for the buyout there. Plus, we still need this $25 million just to even be in the game. That donors will get fatigued very quickly. Right now, there's still a little bit more excitement, I feel like, of like, oh, Texas Tech, like we can spend on a number one portal roster here. And that's, it's this world of possibilities. We still think that can happen. We'll do it 3 years in a row and still be a 7-5 program and then get back to me and see how excited those donors are going to be about that. And then beyond that, how do you ever, Kansas is finding out the hard way right now how much more complicated it makes it when you need to build facilities. So if you got to build facilities in 5 years, good luck. Good luck tapping into the donors then. What are you going to have to do? Well, you probably have to start going into like private equity at that point. This is why we talk about private equity in college athletics. So there's just a million reasons for athletic directors to want this to be very successful. And for many look, there were a bunch of Greg Sankey quotes I was reading in all of these articles over the past week about, hey, like our coaches really want this. They want rules. They want guidelines. Like this is what Greg Sankey is pushing for this. So like everybody in college athletics seems to be pretty on board. Pretty on board. I will just say too, on the Congress end of it, because I know that would be some of the pushback here. You'd say, well, John, if they can get Congress to do something about this, you just told me it seemed like there was a little bit of optimism in some of the reporting there. If they can get Congress to do this, like they should in a lot of ways be fine. Well, I would say one, I just outlined some of the ways they could still cheat. People will definitely still try to cheat and figure out some way to get around it. But two, some of the folks I talked to still shared so much of the obvious pessimisms about even getting something done in Congress, which, that makes sense. I don't know that it's fair to push back on anybody who's just like, hey, dude, people with D's in front of their name and R's in front of their name have to come together and agree on something and agree on a bill to make that happen. So have fun with that. I'm going to bet on the other side, and I'm going to come out a winner more often than not. So, yeah, that's sort of the situation. I'm sure Big 12 athletic directors are not, getting caught completely with their pants down here and have some preparations or are thinking about all sorts of different options. But you also can't go too far down the road with any of those. You got to kind of just wait and see how this plays out. Their jobs are very, very tough. Like, no one's going to shed a tear for the athletic directors when they're making the salaries that they are making, high six figures and up. But I will say they are earning their money more so than they used to, for sure. Because how do you begin to prepare for whatever that is going to be? You just have no idea. And you only just now figured out for sure that the House settlement was going to be a thing less than a month before this actually kicks in. So, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of stress, I'm sure. Now, okay, you heard me. Let me remind you real quick. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Click the $ below the chat box if you'd like to submit a super chat, and make sure your question or comment makes the chat tonight. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you would like to contribute that way as well. You can drop me a question or comment there, and I will kick off the next show with it. And make sure you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. So I just told you, like, hey, I was reading Greg Sankey quotes, SEC commissioner, about how he's like, yeah, House settlement, great. We need to be able to enforce NIL. Our coaches want rules. They want guidelines. You're saying, all right, the SEC is on board with this. The SEC is on board with stopping being able to just go out there with a money gun and pay whoever it is, however much that you want, and like money whip people. Wouldn't that really, really benefit the SEC? Well, wait, could this actually be, if the House settlement is really enforced stringently the way that they optimistically want to think it will be, could that actually be a very bad thing for the Big 12? I think we kind of talked on the other side of it last time, like, hey, if you're not BYU or Texas Tech, may well be a good thing that they won't be able to just money whip you from within the conference. But could this actually be bad for the Big 12 if it goes back to the world that we were in before, which is level playing field, at least above board monetarily? Because Dan Wetzel from ESPN says we probably do need to think further about this. That's the case that he made. All right, so look, the Texas Tech and BYU, that's almost kind of low-hanging fruit with the House settlement because it's so much easier to talk about here. Hey, they're the ones spending the most money. They're the ones with the deepest pockets in the conference. So stands to reason if you get into an unlimited money that can be dished out sort of situation in perpetuity in college sports, yeah, BYU and Texas Tech stand to gain the most, and they would also stand to lose the most if this is actually able to be properly adjudicated by the letter of the law here and what's drawn up in the House settlement. They are in the news right now for just having landed the number one basketball recruit in the country, AJ DeBonsta, which certainly took multiple millions of dollars, and Texas Tech having a $40+ million football roster. Okay. I continue to say a lot of people talking a big game about this, that it is going to stick and that potentially that could be bad news for BYU and Texas Tech. Here's a Brett Yormark quote to give you. Quote, "Our schools want rules and we are providing rules and we will be governed by those rules. If you break those rules, the ramifications will be punitive." So Brett Yormark is in lockstep and in line with what Greg Sankey had to say there. But if the rules look, Brett Yormark's kind of a maverick of a guy, right? He's very, very sure of himself, kind of a maverick sort of personality. Well, if he's got Texas Tech and BYU and they can get out there and spend all their money, again, I can see why you'd say, wouldn't Brett Yormark want to be sort of on the side here of like, let the Mavericks go to work here. Let's shake up the system. I mean, Tech has that portal class. BYU signed the number one player in college basketball. Like, a lot of things are happening in college sports right now that indicate teams outside of the little club, little like 5 to 10 big brand club that typically kind of run everything. Teams are really starting to have some success outside of that they didn't before, when they didn't have the option to just go spend this money. So let me read to you a little bit from Dan Wetzel. He says competitive balance actually leveled during the open NIL era. Certainly in football and men's basketball, where more teams from more places were capable of fielding national championship contenders. Talent, at least among the top 50 schools, spread out. Geography, blue blood history, and preferred shoe company status no longer seemed to matter as much. And it is an interesting point on, like, let's take the shoe company, right? We're in Big 12 country. We know about Kansas and the Adidas stuff and how Adidas was kind of helping funnel players there. I mean, regardless of what you think is how legal or not legal it was, I think we all understand that they played a really influential role in getting some talent there. Now it opens up and Kansas basketball has struggled. Like, they won their national championship right before NIL got totally crazy. It was out there a little bit, but it was not the Wild West that we're in right now. Once that happened, that dynamic has changed and Kansas is no longer running the Big 12. Now, I know many Kansas fans would look at me as the typical K-State fan that would be here to say, oh, well, I tell you what, all of a sudden everybody can pay players and look what happened to Kansas. Like, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that. I think it's all of a sudden, if everybody else can pay a bunch of money and get in the game that way, it just introduces a whole new dynamic where you're having to manage money. And the transfer portal in particular has probably hurt Kansas more so than the money part of this. But it's just been a new dynamic. And Bill Self had the old dynamic figured out. It's been a new dynamic. Bill Self has not been able to figure it out. And it has created, I guess you could say, more parity in the Big 12, certainly a more interesting environment in Big 12 basketball than what it was when Kansas was winning every single year. I get what Wetzel is saying in terms of football talent being a little bit more spread out. I mean, for a while there was Alabama, LSU, Clemson, Ohio State. Just every single year, one of those teams going to be winning the national championship. We did now get to a point where over the last 3 years, you've had Michigan, Washington, TCU, Notre Dame, all involved in national championship games. But, Michigan was the only one of those to win. Was it NIL that really made that difference there that got Michigan over the hump? I mean, they were, a blue blood, still kind of out of that national championship club before then. I don't know that I would argue that it was really like NIL that flipped the switch and made that big difference for them. But if you want to say that the general trend has been more teams have gotten in there, like, okay. But, Washington and TCU got their asses kicked when they did play for the national championship. But they did get in there. So, like, I will buy that it's maybe spread out the talent a little bit. That was a point that I was making back about particularly like Georgia, Looking at their season this year, it's harder to hoard a second and third string that would be as talented but again, the portal, NIL is a part of it, but the portal being something here. There is something too that NIL has spread out talent a little bit, and it's given some places the opportunity to do things that they otherwise wouldn't. I will reemphasize that point. I don't think anyone would say that 2015 Texas Tech, if the portal existed, would have been able to put together a number one portal class if they couldn't just throw as much money as they possibly could from oil booster billionaires to get that. And that's not a slam to Texas Tech. That is like anybody in the Big 12, but Texas Tech is the example because they've actually figured out how to do it here now. And so the argument basically is that, hey, if you take that away, you remove that opportunity from places like that, well, then it's just going to go back to tradition, facilities, under the table cash, like whoever's doling out the most of that, which is what college football was forever until the last like 5 years. We're just going to go back to what it used to be. And talent will be a little bit less spread out. And that could decrease parity. And it could make it more difficult for teams in the Big 12 to like really, truly compete in the college football playoff or at the highest level. There's a legitimate argument to be made for that. There definitely is. You know, I mean, I was thinking about it. I was like, so 10 years ago, you did feel like maybe if you wanted to try and spin it positively, you could say, well, 10 years ago, it did feel like K-State, Baylor, TCU made legitimate runs. Oklahoma State made legitimate runs at national championships and felt like they had a much more realistic chance. The problem now is that even if you go back to that system and you'd say, oh, well, back then it felt like they actually had a more realistic chance to win the title. The playoff has dramatically changed the calculus on all of that, right? So that has totally changed it. But I do think it's a fair point being made by Dan Wetzel here, and something that was worth diving into a little bit more, that this is a bit more complex than just like, hey, Texas Tech and BYU's futures are on the line. But it's more like, all right, the Big 12, if the Big 12 ADs get what they want, which is like not having to worry quite as much about the money getting crazy out of control, does that actually then just still widen the gap between Big 10, SEC, and everybody else, which obviously includes the Big 12? Here's a little bit more. There were a couple quotes from Big 12 coaches, including Kelvin Sampson, in this article from Dan Wetzel, who said, if nothing else, much of it was out in the open. There were no more false caps, no more bagmen or cars in grandma's name or Adidas execs getting hauled off by the FBI. He's talking about the last couple of years with wide open NIL. Quote, I don't want it to get where they put it back under the table. Houston men's basketball coach Kelvin Sampson told ESPN, let's keep everything above. Let's keep everything on the table. I mean, that to me sounds like that's really kind of an argument for the current system as opposed to house settlement, Deloitte enforcement system, right? Because that's going to encourage, everybody seems to think, and I understand the logic, that encourages more under the table spending. Whereas right now, nobody has anything to be afraid of. So it is all out there in the open. It is totally out there in the open. Really, the point here is just that this is very complicated. This is very complicated. It will take a lot to sort out. We're just going to have to watch not only what happens with lawsuits and what happens in Congress, but then once we have whatever those parameters are, we got to let it go play out and see how it will actually work in practice. You certainly got to think Big Ten, SEC, like they're going to be pretty thirsty and desperate to do whatever it is that they can twist those into advantages, especially you think about the SEC. We've given them a lot of crap for what happened last year, but that's a year that they're not happy with as a conference. They're going to be fighting and scrapping and clawing and ready to do whatever it is that they can to bend the rules to their will, whatever they wind up being, and use them to their advantage. So I think it's not just BYU and Texas Tech fans that need to be watching closely. It is everybody in the Big 12. All right, let's hop into a couple of super chats. What's up, Rise and Shout? Thank you for being here. If you want to be like Rise and Shout, click the $sign below the chat box in order to do that. Rise and Shout says, do we know besides the Ivy League, is anyone else going to opt out of revenue sharing? College sports feels so different compared to the 90s now. You know, off the top of my head, I feel like there have been a couple of some of the like lower level FBS conferences that have talked about that. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, Rise and Shout. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better grasp on that. Totally opting out. Yeah, because I was like, I think there's still maybe some question as to some Power Four schools if they'll be able to hit the full 20.5 number. You may run into a place or two that won't. But yeah, it's a good question. It's a good question. And it definitely, I mean, it feels, forget the 90s, man. I mean, it feels so much different than when I was in college, in the mid to late 2000s to early 2010s when I was in college. Like, worlds different since then. My career, really a good way I think that I like to frame it up is like my professional career covering college sports. Like, I started traveling. I graduated in 2011. I started traveling with K-State football at that point to do pregame radio. And in 2011, man, I mean, it was a completely different world. And we were still pretty far off from like all of these changes. Like, at that point, even the Alston stuff, where it was just paying for more than just the bare bones like scholarship that you were getting, was like that was a big thing. That was a fight for a long time. So yeah, we've come a crazy, covered a crazy amount of space in a very short period of time. Thank you, Rise and Shout. Wyatt, what's up, Wyatt? Thank you for being here. Appreciate you, my friend. Wyatt says Texas Tech spent $55 million in NIL across all sports this year, potentially the most in the country. BYU spent $4 million on a basketball player. They are not the same. To me, the BYU stuff is more about potential, Wyatt. I think BYU, if they want to, could get into spending in a very similar fashion to what Texas Tech is doing. I think they have those types of resources because of the LDS Church and their alums. Like, I just mean like the LDS Church gives you the breadth of the fan base is much wider, right? Like, you just have so many more people across the country and across the globe, and their culture is one of success. They have a lot of very successful people. I think they could push it a lot if they really wanted to. Now, if you want to question their appetite to, that's obviously been the debate of Twitter over the last like 4 or 5 months, particularly when was that? Like 2 months ago or something, that became a big thing. If they want to do it, I mean, look, they also money whipped Baylor's best guard that Baylor desperately wanted to keep. I mean, they did that too. Maybe BYU fans would get mad at me for saying money whipped there. I understand they have a good system to sell. They've got a great coach. There's a lot to like there, but Baylor's a pretty damn good program, and they were able to pull him away from there. I think it would be naive to think that money didn't play at least a pretty big role in doing that. So I would not underestimate BYU's spending power there. But your point is well taken. I mean, that is something that was discussed this week, is that Texas Tech spent more money potentially than anybody with $55 million in NIL across all sports this year. I mean, Texas Tech is flexing its muscle, and early returns are pretty damn good, right? You go get Canada, the best softball player in the country, and come within one game of winning a national championship. So that sure looks like it's off to a good start. And then, by the way, booked her to another 7-figure NIL deal to run it back and do it again next year. We'll see how I think it's complicated in football because there's so many more moving parts. But it's going to be a really fascinating case study. BYU's not there yet. I'm with you on that. And there have been people that have raised question marks about, their football NIL and how much they're willing to go there. Maybe some different donors with basketball. Maybe, Brian Santiago being a big factor in what was going on with men's basketball last year. Lot of things that are factors here, but just don't underestimate the Cougars is what I would say on that. I would love to be in BYU's position from a financial standpoint. I would put it that way, but I appreciate you, Wyatt. Thank you for your comment. Speaking of BYU, go ahead and like the video. Hey, BYU fans, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Anybody that's here, though. Hit me up on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4. If you donate and leave a question or comment there, I'll kick off the next show with it. And make sure you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com. That is ofbnews.com to do that. It's been tough. I just said BYU has a ton of money, but the headlines have been tough on BYU fans and frankly everybody lately with everything that happened with Jake Retzloff. It has put BYU's season on the brink, much less potentially really heinous things that could have happened to the victim there. It's not a fun time. That's not a fun thing to endure as a fan base. If you want something to make you feel a little bit better, though, I do have a W to hand to the Cougars officially today here on the show. Big time W. And not just for BYU. This actually bleeds out into most everybody in the conference outside of one fan base, that one being Utah, who fought this one tooth and nail when it was actually happening during the fall. So I don't think I need to tell you guys, most people understand here, how good the Holy War has been for this conference. We lost Bedlam, which was a great bitter rivalry. I guess Colorado's back in the league. We don't have Colorado, Nebraska anymore. Nebraska and Oklahoma are both gone. Like these Big 8, Big 12 rivalries needed one that was just really bitter and fierce. And the Holy War has completely delivered on that. There's so much baked into it when you talk about the cultural differences, for some, the religious differences there. I mean, that brings a totally different tone to a rivalry. Say what you will about it, whether good or bad, or if it should or shouldn't. I do think it is the reality, right? Then even beyond that, I mean, you've got the proximity. They're so damn close to each other. You've got the Big 12, Pac-12 thing layered onto it. The whole online fight that took place over the course of like a year and a half. I mean, that was a massive, massive thing. That added different layers and different context to this. And then finally, Utah gets forced to join the same conference that BYU is in when they feel like they are above that. Like there are so many feelings across all of this, which makes it wildly entertaining to watch. I mean, it has been fascinating to watch unfold on Twitter, if I'm being honest, as a third-party observer. And then we get to the actual fall last year, and I'm like, all right, great. Let's see how this goes on the field, man. And we get a classic game, maybe not the prettiest game in the world, but a classic game, classic finish. And did we get a press conference? We got a press conference. After the controversy, the controversial holding call on 4th down on BYU's eventual game-winning drive when it looked like Utah had that thing stopped, Mark Harlan decided to just go off after, yelling at officials plenty on the field in the immediate aftermath of the game. What was that? Is that official's name? Like Kevin Marr or something? The guy who was getting an earful after the game. Mark Harlan really, really popped off. Said the game was, quote, absolutely stolen from Utah. That was a part of the impromptu press conference afterwards. The game was absolutely stolen. He was disgusted by the professionalism of the Big 12 officiating crew, disgusted by the professionalism, and decided to call an impromptu press conference to say all of this. And it wasn't just going after the refs. He decided to play into, and this is where, Mark Harlan's smart enough to know what he was doing here. He knows how Utah fans have generally thought about the Big 12, at least the vocal online ones, and what the perception had been of Utah and how much they liked or did not like being in the Big 12 conference. And he had this to say as well. He said, we were excited about being in the Big 12, but tonight I am not. We won this game. And said he was going to talk to the commissioner because, quote, this was not fair to our team. Even going back and reading that now, I'm just like, damn, man, he really let it fly. He really, really let it fly. Well, if you're a Utah fan, and there were certainly many in this category, if you're a Utah fan, you're sitting there like, well, maybe he was right. Like, that was a BS call. The TV angles did not, well, is it really just fair to say angle? I mean, we didn't get much on the TV broadcast. When you first initially saw it, you can be like, man, yeah, that did seem like maybe it was a little bit weak of a call. But then we start to see other angles. All these other angles start to surface on Twitter, and it becomes pretty obvious. If you were the official right there seeing it like that, like, yeah, it was definitely a hold. I mean, it was definitely a hold. But of course, after the game, Utah is going to send complaints about that. And I think it was 6 calls total. Let me go ahead and pull up this tweet that I'm about to show you. They have like 6 calls total that they send into the conference office for review after that. And one of them, of course, was the holding call that we spent so much time on that. People spent so much time crying and whining and moaning about what happened in that call. And very quietly, very quietly now here in the summer. So June, far away from November. Are we like 7 months later? Like 7 months later, we finally get resolution on this, if you want to call it that. But Jeff Fuller, shout out to Jeff. Great Twitter follow. Would definitely recommend that. I said a Lubbock reporter got the Big 12 officials' review of team disputed calls this past season. The headliner, the controversial holding call. In fact, Utah disputed 6 errant calls. Okay, I was right. 6 errant calls. Well, guess what? The reviewer from the conference, Big 12 reviewed it, and they said the holding call was the right call. So, not some in-the-moment mistake here. The Big 12 has said upon review, it was the correct call for holding. And out of the 6 calls that Utah did basically send in for review here, the only one that the conference agreed, like, oh, hey, wait, yeah, we were wrong, was that they got a player number incorrect when assessing the penalty. And Jeff points out, okay, some might think that's just ref homerism, but the same official agreed with 5 of the 13 challenge calls in the Tech Colorado game and 2 of the 10 challenges in the Cincinnati West Virginia game. So he gives a couple other examples where there were more that they actually agreed with here. So it's not just the refs protecting themselves. But you can see where, let's see. Here we go. Receiver stops and comes back for the pass. Defender has right arm around receiver's waist. Maybe I'm in which one am I reading here? Yeah, here we go. My fault. Last one. My bad, guys. That was a bad one. I should have just looked at the bottom. Here we go. 4th quarter. QB looks to number 5 immediately after the snap as receiver moves to go around a defender. The defender grabs the receiver and prevents him from running his route. Correct call. Pretty simple. Simple explanation from the Big 12 there. But that's what they have to say about the holding call heard around the country. Certainly the holding call heard around the Big 12 last year between Utah and BYU. So there you have it. That's a W. Okay. That is a W, my friends in Provo. I'm trying to help you out here. Frankly, it's just a W for like everybody involved. That turned into such a crazy thing. I wouldn't change it. I would not change that for the world, because I think having the Holy War get extra attention and be put into the national spotlight, and just the things that make college sports fun, right? It's the hated rivals. It's everybody, Utah against the world sort of stuff that creates storylines. It creates drama. It creates a matchup that we're all going to be looking way more forward to seeing this year than we would have otherwise, because we've got some added juice to this. So it's going to be awesome to see that game take place in Provo this year. So would not change it. Mark Harlan, I very much appreciate that you did that for all of us. Especially, I mean, look, I'm a content creator here. Like, of course, I feel like I'm contractually obligated to thank Mark Harlan for that in giving us that content and everything that happened. But yeah, it's pretty vindicating to be like, yeah, that was obviously the right call. Like it was obviously the right call. Said it at the time. Once you started seeing those other angles, it became overwhelmingly obvious. And now here we have it. I guess I understand why these are not all made public, right? To not just throw the wolves at officials even more. If you're going to say, oh, well, the conference actually agreed that was a crappy call that the guy made or whatever. You've already got like Kentucky fans going after John Higgins' roofing business for calls that he made in a basketball game. You don't want to encourage or stoke the flames on any more of that. Understood. But in situations like this, it's like, I don't know, could you leak that to a reporter or something sooner? Like, hey, like, actually this controversial call that this one fan base is just going nuts about, like, our refs got it right, man. Let's stand by our officials. Let's stand by Kevin. Be like, hey, that was not bad. That was not bad. That was one thought I had with that. Like, I feel like officials sometimes would want these to come out. Like, hey, if it's positive, can we just leak it to a reporter? You know, just anonymous source it to a reporter, get the screenshot out there of what the review is, and we'll be good. We'll be good. Okay, I think I will hold off until the next live show on the stuff about the next 2 seasons, the ESPN Top 25. of the next 2 seasons. 4 Big 12 teams in the top 25, but one head and shoulders above the rest that they are very, very high on. I'll leave that as a tease for you for next time. But if you subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com, you will get that in your inbox before the next live show. So make sure to do that, ofbnews.com, to subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter. Please do like the video on your way out the door. That would be great. Subscribe to the channel. That would also be great. Appreciate all of you guys who do that. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. If you want to leave a question or comment there, I'll kick off the next show with it if you do. Let's talk to Northside real quick. Northside, what's up? Northside said, CU wide receiver and D-line is different this year. Going to lead the Big 12 in sacks again. We're taking the Big 12 championship. All right, Northside bringing it strong. Colorado's defense, I'm not gonna fight you much on the defensive line and the defense being much better and improved last year. Now, there are some pieces from that defense that definitely need to be replaced. Colorado did. I don't think we should act like they didn't lose any firepower there. The receivers different this year. The receivers could be very good this year. I don't know how they would possibly be better than last year. Not only obviously Travis Hunter, but that group was so damn deep last season. Jimmy Horn's gone too, right? Jimmy Horn got drafted. So, that we'll see. And you also got to have someone to get him the ball. Shedeur Sanders takes so much crap that honestly frustrates me. I thought the guy was a superhero with how he played last year, especially with that offensive line in front of him. Jordan Seaton's a year older. They have transfers coming in again. We'll see, but I've still got some concerns there. I would disagree with you, Northside, but I appreciate your zeal. I appreciate your zest for the Buffaloes, how emphatically you feel about this. I would encourage you to come back here. Don't be a stranger on the channel and let it fly, my friend. We need more Colorado fans. We need more Colorado fans around here pushing that. So thank you, Northside. Great to see you here. Also, I've got a soft spot for the Cubs. So go Cubbies. I'll give you that. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan says, John, missed the earlier part of the show, but important to support your efforts. Hey, thank you, Alan. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate you so much. Eager for the season to start. Yeah, me too. We're June. This is where it starts to get tough. Although I will say this, we're less than a month out from Big 12 Media Days. And that is a really exciting pop of football in the summer that will provide a lot of content for a couple of weeks, not just from me, but from all the content creators in this space. And will just give us intriguing storylines, a lot more going on. Like that'll get the juices flowing a little bit. And then by the time that wears off, we're pretty much in August. And at that point you can sort of white knuckle it and ride it out. So, yeah, but when I'm sitting here on June, still talking about house settlement stuff, yeah, it makes me want the season to get here. When I'm sitting here talking about the Holy War and how that game went, it makes me want the season to be here. So thank you, Alan. Appreciate you as always, my friend. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your contribution. And thank you for everybody who joined tonight. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I will plan on talking to you very soon.